Prison is meant to be a place of punishment and rehabilitation, but for some notorious criminals, it became their final resting place. In today's video, we're diving into the stories of 10 notorious criminals who were murdered in prison. From violent mobsters to infamous serial killers, these individuals' final moments are as shocking as the crimes that led them to prison in the first place. Stay tuned, because some of these murders will leave you questioning how far justice can truly go behind bars. 10. Richard Kuklinski. Richard Kuklinski, infamously known as the Iceman, was a notorious contract killer who claimed to have murdered over 100 people during his chilling career, working for powerful criminal organizations, including the Mafia. Kuklinski was known for his brutal and calculated methods, which earned him his deadly nickname. He was a man who seemed to have no remorse for his actions, and his reputation alone was enough to instill fear across the criminal underworld. However, in 2005, while serving multiple life sentences for his numerous murders, Kuklinski was found dead in his prison cell. The cause of death was reported as heart failure, but there were immediate rumors that he had been poisoned by a fellow inmate. Some speculate that the poisoning was an act of revenge from those who had been affected by his merciless actions, while others believe it was orchestrated by individuals with ties to the powerful figures Kuklinski had worked with on the outside. His alleged poisoning was seen by some as a form of cosmic justice, a violent end for a man who had never shown mercy. Interestingly, Kuklinski had made enemies even within the prison system, where his cold, unfeeling nature made him a target. The fact that his death came in such an isolated and suspicious manner only deepened the mystery surrounding his life and death. Some theorists suggest that his connections to the Mafia were still alive and active even after he was behind bars, and his death may have been a final way for those he once worked for to silence him once and for all. Whatever the truth, Richard Kuklinski's death only solidified his place as one of the most feared and infamous criminals in history, leaving behind a legacy of cold-blooded killings and unanswered questions. 9. Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa, the infamous labor union leader, disappeared mysteriously in 1975, and to this day his fate remains one of the most perplexing and heavily debated cases in American criminal history. Hoffa was a larger-than-life figure, known for his leadership of the Teamsters and his close connections to organized crime. As a powerful union boss, Hoffa's dealings with the Mafia were well documented, and many believe that these connections ultimately led to his downfall. While Hoffa's body was never found, the general consensus is that he was murdered by members of the mob, who had grown tired of his increasing power and influence. The most famous theory is that he was last seen on July 30th, 1975, outside the McCool's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan, where he was allegedly lured to his death by mob associates. But the details surrounding his death are far from clear, and over the years, another theory has emerged suggesting that Hoffa's murder may have occurred in prison. In 1982, a new narrative began to take shape. Some believed Hoffa was killed in prison after his criminal connections turned sour, especially with members of the Mafia. Hoffa, by that time, was no longer in a position of power, and his entanglements with organized crime had become a liability. The idea that the mob may have taken matters into their own hands inside the prison system seemed plausible to some. Allegedly, Hoffa's silence was deemed necessary, as he had become too dangerous a figure to leave alive. In the years since, numerous theories about Hoffa's fate have surfaced, including claims that his body was disposed of in a variety of ways, from being buried beneath a Detroit area ballpark to being incinerated in a crematorium. The truth remains elusive, and despite many investigations, his murder continues to be one of the most tightly sealed secrets in criminal history. 8. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos, one of the most infamous female serial killers in American history, was convicted of the murders of 7 men between 1989 and 1990. Wuornos, a prostitute who claimed she killed in self-defense during attempted sexual assaults, became a symbol of both victimhood and violent revenge. Her trial and subsequent conviction in 1992 garnered intense media attention. And in 2002, after spending over a decade on death row, she was executed by lethal injection. However, Wuornos' life behind bars was anything but calm. Known for her volatile and erratic behavior, she often clashed with prison authorities and fellow inmates. Her demeanor was marked by paranoia, outbursts, and a general mistrust of others. While awaiting her execution, Wuornos became a subject of fascination. with many wondering if her actions were the result of mental illness or a reflection of the trauma she endured throughout her life. She was described as a woman hardened by abuse and a life on the streets, which contributed to her aggressive and unpredictable behavior. In October 2002, Wuornos was found dead in her cell after being assaulted by another inmate. The official cause of death was reported as suicide by gunshot, but there has always been speculation about the circumstances surrounding her death. Some theorize that her murder was a form of revenge for the brutal killings she had committed, especially considering her notoriety as one of the most controversial female serial killers. Others suggest that Wuornos' mental instability and dangerous interactions with other prisoners led to her violent end, perhaps a result of escalating tensions in the prison environment. Regardless of the exact cause, Wuornos' death only added to her already infamous legacy. She had become a symbol of both societal injustice and the dark side of human nature. Her life and death continue to fascinate criminologists, filmmakers, and true crime enthusiasts, as her story remains one of the most tragic and complex in criminal history. 7. Frank Costello. Frank Costello, known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld, was one of the most influential mobsters in American history. As the head of the Luciano crime family, and later the Genovese family, Costello controlled much of the criminal empire in New York City during the 1940s and 1950s. He was a master of manipulation, known for his ability to maintain power while staying out of the public eye. Costello's influence spanned everything from labor unions to illegal gambling, making him a key figure in the landscape of organized crime. Despite his low-key approach to criminality, Costello's reign ended violently. By the early 1970s, Costello's power was waning, and he had made a number of enemies within the mafia. One of his greatest betrayals came when he was accused of undermining the mafia's code of silence, or which was the foundation of mob loyalty. His betrayal didn't go unnoticed, and in 1973, while he was serving time in prison, Costello became the target of a mob hit ordered by those who felt he had compromised the integrity of the organization. Costello was murdered by another inmate at the Notorious Attica Correctional Facility. The killer was a hitman sent by members of the mafia to eliminate Costello for his perceived treachery. The attack was swift and brutal, and Costello, once considered the most powerful mob boss in the country, was silenced. The murder not only marked the end of an era for the mafia, but also served as a grim reminder of the unforgiving nature of the criminal world. The violent nature of his death and the fact that it occurred behind bars solidified the brutal reality of crossing the lines in organized crime. To this day, Frank Costello's name is remembered as both a symbol of power and a cautionary tale. His death serves as a stark warning to anyone in the criminal underworld. Betray the code, and there will be consequences even within the walls of a prison. 6. John Gotti Jr. While John Gotti, the infamous Teflon Don, died of cancer, his son, John Gotti Jr., spent much of his life in and out of prison, though he survived numerous attempts on his life. Many people believed he was targeted by rivals within the mafia during his imprisonment. Gotti's fate was intertwined with the underworld, and although his life behind bars wasn't marked by his own murder, the threats surrounding him made him a key figure in the violent saga of organized crime. 5. Clayton Lockett, convicted of a brutal murder. Clayton Lockett was executed in 2014, but his story took a dark twist. After he was placed on death row, Lockett's execution went horribly wrong, and he was left to suffer for 43 minutes before finally passing away. The incident raised serious questions about prison justice, and many wondered if Lockett's prolonged suffering was a form of cruel revenge carried out by the authorities. His death became a controversial moment in the history of prison executions. 4. Charles Manson. The notorious leader of the Manson family cult, Charles Manson's death in 2017 wasn't a murder at the hands of fellow inmates, but his life behind bars was filled with violence and hostility. Throughout his prison sentence, Manson had run-ins with other inmates. Some believed that his volatile nature would eventually lead to his demise. Though he ultimately died of natural causes, his long history of violence and manipulation continued to haunt the prison system until his death. 3. Rafael Pony Sanchez, a notorious drug lord. Rafael Pony Sanchez was involved in one of the most dangerous criminal enterprises in Latin America. In 2008, While serving a sentence for drug trafficking in a maximum security prison, Sanchez was murdered by fellow inmates. It's believed his death was linked to betrayals within his criminal organization, as well as a desire for control over his drug empire, even behind bars. His brutal murder only solidified his reputation as a criminal to be feared, both inside and outside prison walls. 2. Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez, who terrorized California in the 1980s with a spree of brutal murders, was sentenced to death. While serving time on death row, Ramirez became a target for other inmates. Due to the gruesome nature of his crimes, in 1999, a fellow prisoner attacked Ramirez, and rumors spread that it was an act of revenge by a victim, his family member, or someone seeking justice for his horrifying actions. Ramirez survived the attack but was never able to fully escape the hostility that followed him into prison. 1. Whitey Bulger. James Whitey Bulger, the notorious leader of the Winter Hill Gang in Boston, lived a life of crime that spanned decades. Known for his ruthless control over the city's underworld and his connections with corrupt FBI agents, Bulger was one of the most feared criminals in America. After years on the run, Bulger was finally captured in 2011. But his life behind bars quickly became infamous. Bulger's prison story took a violent turn. While incarcerated at the United States Penitentiary in West Virginia, he was brutally murdered by fellow inmates in 2018. Bulger, at the time 89 years old, had been placed in a high-security facility despite his advanced age, sparking speculation that his death was more than just a random act of violence. The attack was swift and gruesome, with reports stating that his eyes had been gouged out and his tongue cut out, symbolic of the violent retribution many believed he deserved for his past crimes. Many believe Bulger's death was not a simple prison altercation, but a hit orchestrated by rivals or former associates who held deep grudges against him. In prison, he was seen as a rat by many of his fellow inmates, having turned on his own criminal associates in order to secure a deal with the government, leading to a vicious reputation. His murder served as a grim reminder of the long reach of vengeance in the criminal world, even behind bars. Bulger's demise sparked numerous investigations, but his violent death continues to be seen as a tragic yet fitting end to the life of a man who was feared and ultimately silenced. From gang hits to mob retribution, the fates of these notorious criminals remind us that even behind bars, the world of crime is far from over. Their deaths raise more questions than answers, leaving us wondering how far some will go to silence their past or settle old scores. Which story shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below.